Hello and welcome to this Gluware tutorial OS Manager Part 2. In this video, we're going to use the OS Manager app to run through how to build, validate, and run OS plans, along with a lot of additional details. So if you didn't get a chance yet, I do recommend watching Part 1, which covers the prerequisites for running OSM, including licensing, role-based access control, settings, options, file server, and more. So let's get into this demo by logging into this Gluware instance. I'll just quickly note I'm using the demo.gluware.com instance, which is used for our test drive. So if you're doing our test drive, you can follow along. If you are interested in evaluating Gluware hands-on, you can go to gluware.com and request the test drive. So let's get signed in. So here we are, we get signed into the last app we were in. I just want to quickly note in the dashboard app, we have an example dashboard that's been built and can be shared that highlights the status of the activities within OS management. So what you're seeing here is fully customizable. These are all widgets that present data in the underlying system. This dashboard has been built to highlight OS Manager, which is highlighting the top OS versions we're running, any plans that had failures, how many plans have completed, what is my schedule, what is my file server status, and more. So you can build a dashboard that highlights exactly what you want to see to give you a summary. Let's say you have ongoing projects where you're rolling out upgrades or downgrades. You can track that via a dashboard. So let's use the left-hand nav bar to navigate into OS Manager. One quick note about the nav. Again, this might not be in the same exact order you see because the nav bar does support drag and drop order control. You can put it in the order you want. You also can click it to jump directly into the app, or you can use the side panel to go into a specific view. So we're going to go and start in the devices view. Okay, so here the OS Manager app has opened, and I know that because OS Manager is in the top bar here. I'll also quickly note that I am in a specific org, which Gluware is multi-tenant. We call them organizations, and organizations are logically separate from all the other ones. They can be related with a parent-child type relationship. We covered some of that in part 1, but I'm in pod 4 here, which is made up of these devices. And again, this is just a test and demo system, so it's not huge in scale and only has a couple of vendors in it, but it's good for demo purposes, and we'll get through showing you OS Manager. So OS Manager as an app has a very similar look and feel to several other apps, including the Device Manager app and the Config Drift and Audit app, in that you have a lower panel or pane, which is called the Device Explorer, and you see all your devices here. You can filter, search them. So you have that kind of consistent interaction in terms of using Device Explorer for searching, sorting, all of that sort of thing. One thing I do want to make a point about is that the columns you see, by default, Gluware presents columns that are specific for the app that you've navigated into. So there are more columns turned on that are related to OS Manager, like the OSM action status, the OSM action by, OSM action on. So all of these are turned on by default, but you can customize them by going into columns and turning on or off the columns that you want to see. So the column view is fully customizable, but we try to present the information that's most useful in the app that you're in. The other thing to note about Device Explorer is your views and actions change based on what app you're in. So from a views standpoint, you can navigate to the Catalog Explorer, which you see here. We'll go into that. Or you can navigate into the Plan Explorer, or you can navigate obviously into the devices. There's also navigation on the bottom panel here. So let's go back to our devices view. Next are your actions. One of the main activities you're going to be doing within OS Manager is building plans. It is a plan-centric app where you build a plan, you execute a plan. So we'll be doing a lot of that. You also have a few other actions that are exposed in other apps, including when you select devices. If I select one or more devices in my grid, I can execute the backup. Introduced in Gluware 5.3, we have backup and restore, config backup and restore, so you can select devices, execute backups. We expose a link to the ad hoc query, Ad hoc query allows you to execute queries of config or queries of operational state. So if you want to, on all your spokes in this example, you want to run, show IPBGP neighbor, you can do all of that through the ad hoc query. This next action button executes a device reboot. So if, as part of your operational process, need to reboot a device, you can select it and execute that reboot from here. Here you can select your devices and you can export them in a spreadsheet. And the final action here is running a report. So this runs the default report. You can change what your default report is, and you can go into the Data Explorer, customize your reports, and change default reports. So again, normally you have like an OS Manager summary report or something that's tied to your Run Report button here. So before moving on into building plans, we'll cover one other quick item here, which is catalogs. What a catalog is, and I have one created here, you can add them using your action bar, you can edit them. I'm going to double click in, and the use of a catalog is recommended, but basically a catalog is where you're saying, for this SKU type, these are the image, this is the image or images that are approved for use. So it's like an administrative control to only expose certain image selections for certain SKUs. So in this example, I've named it CSR. From a device matching standpoint in my inventory, I said, you can use a regex and said match on CSR. It is going to match on all CSR 1000 Vs, one device SKU type here. I've gone into my image catalog here, and I've selected the image that I want to use for that SKU. And so this is an administrative way to define that. And we'll see how that comes into play. So again, catalogs are very useful, and it is an administrative control. We do recommend it when using OS Manager in production. When in a testing environment, controls and catalogs aren't as required. So let's close out of that view, and let's go to the next view here, which is the Plan Explorer. So I can see all the plans that have been run, and I get what was the action, what was the name, the devices, the status, and I see all of that here. And what I want to do is go ahead and build a new plan. So we're going to say add OS plan, and we'll call OSM-demo. So now we have our plan name, OSM demo. There's an optional description, and then the plan action. Most of our users in production execute upgrades in 2 steps. They have a step where they transfer the image onto the devices, so those devices are staged and ready to go. That can be executed. It's not disruptive, so it can be executed potentially outside a maintenance window. Some customers are very conservative and even execute this within like a change or a maintenance window. There's really not much, there's no disruption, there's no outage, but you are interrupting that device to transfer an image onto it. It'll take a little bit of CPU and bandwidth as that is occurring. So that's the transfer. When you do deploy can be used in the second phase, which is to activate that image and reboot the device and take advantage of that new operating system you just moved on that device or set of devices. But also deploy will look to see if the image is there or not. So if you execute a deploy and you have not executed a transfer prior to it, deploy will also transfer the image and then deploy. So this one will really be a 2-in-1 if that is the case. Next is group by SKU. I'll show you that in a second. And then you have an option to skip API image compatibility check. So what this is doing, and the current vendor that we have API integration with is Cisco, the Cisco Support API. That was covered in part 1. But if you do have your Cisco Support API connected, what we will do for the devices that support it is we will send the SKU and the OS image to check that they are compatible as a pre-check. You don't want to put an image onto a device that's not compatible. And when you just file transfer, you can kind of file transfer anything onto a device. But if you're pointing to that image and trying to boot from it, it has to be compatible. So this is an additional health check or type of validation to ensure the image is compatible. And again, today that in Gluware 5.3, that's only with Cisco integration. On the right-hand side here, you're going to move through your draft you have to validate your plan, and then you run your plan. So we're currently in the draft status. And then you also have the ability to integrate with our snapshotting, our config snapshot, which is most visible in our drift and audit app. The reason you would, in a best practice, want to execute a capture before and after is because oftentimes when you change an operating system version, certain things in the config change. Maybe the vendor has changed a command name, maybe certain things are shown versus not shown, maybe additional features are available. So it is very useful to do a capture before and after. And if you are doing a capture after, I do recommend also then setting it as the default so that the subsequent compares are compared to it. So just to save time in our demos here, we're not going to be turning those on, but again, we do recommend that. So once those things are set, we're going to go ahead and add devices. And just for demonstration's sake, I'm going to quickly add all devices because I want to showcase that when you build an OS plan, it doesn't have to be single device or single device type or SKU. It can be multi-vendor, multi-device, multi-platform. You can make a big plan and then Gluware will go and execute the plan. This is built so you can update a data center, or you can update a branch location with like various pieces of equipment. So plans are pretty comprehensive in that you can add any of the device mix as you like here. So you execute a save and then go back. So what I wanted to just highlight real quickly is that we're grouping by SKU. So the default behavior will group all like devices under a single line item that then you're going to assign an OS image to. So this is like a many to one, so to speak, right? So I have 6 CSRs in this particular demo pod. So because I'm grouping by SKU, all 6 of those will map to the OS that I choose. So when I do the next step here of assigning the operating systems, I want to show you that because for the CSRs, I have a catalog defined, the catalog is saying, hey, your catalog is this image. So it's limiting my choices. I have administrative control to actually go back to the server and choose other images. But as I was saying, from an administration standpoint, it is a best practice to have an approval and a facilitation of exactly what images operations can do, because you don't want them choosing the wrong image for some reason. So anyway, you'd select that image, you'd add it over, you select your transfer protocol. We support FTP, TFTP, and SCP. SCP is preferred because it's secure copy protocol. It is authenticated and encrypted, so it is really the best way that you're going to want to execute upgrades. TFTP, a trivial file transfer protocol, and FTP are still supported because there are legacy devices out there our customers are running that don't yet support SCP. So these are supported for kind of for legacy coverage, but we would recommend you use SCP in production. The only downside is because of the authentication and encryption, there's a little more overhead in terms of execution size. But one of the benefits is you can actually control the window size, and that's what this is on the fly. When we set this up, we will change the TCP and SSH window sizes to maximize the speed of the transfer to accommodate that. So that's what that is in terms of window size. So you hit save and back, and you would step through that and assign your operating systems for each of your SKUs, and then you run through a validation, and then you would execute your plan. One other quick thing I want to touch on here in the plan builder here is configure options. Configure options was introduced in Gluware 5.3. If you watched part 1, you already saw how the options can be configured in the settings. When you configure it in the settings, those are inherited to all the plans. So if I didn't touch the setting, what the settings that I have here, if I look at Cisco, and if in my settings I said to skip a file integrity check, that would be inherited here. The reason you have it at the plan level is you have the ability to override what you had at the settings level and have a specific operational choice here. So The reason, just a quick summary, and the reason that options were exposed is that Gluware takes a very conservative approach to an OS process. We're going to do all the pre-checks and validations we can do to minimize a failure that could result in breaking a device or downtime. So we're going to do all the pre-checks and post-checks. Those things do take additional time, and sometimes you'll have failures for kind of, let's say, silly reasons, like someone didn't save a running config. In the health check of the device, we make sure the running config has been saved. If it hasn't been saved, we fail that device, and then you have to fix that and rerun your plan. But sometimes certain things, like for example, during the transfer only phase, you're never getting to that reboot step. So maybe you want to skip the health check during that phase of it. Now, we recommend you run all your checks, but we have customers for various reasons that want to have controls of these. With this addition in Gluware 5.3, we have the ability now to add OSM options per vendor or per OS, and keep expanding on the options that we support in a package release. So we have package releases roughly every 2 weeks or twice a month, and we will keep adding to the vendor coverage and options over time. So you will continue to see this increment with additional vendors and coverage. So we're not going to be doing any of the options here in this demo, but I did just want to highlight what that is. So I've gone through this plan to show you a variety of things, including the group by SKUs and having a situation where you have multiple different, let's say, vendors and images. The other option you have here is, instead of group by SKU, you can switch it to none. And then instead of grouping by SKU, you actually can assign an image to each device. So if you do need more granular control, you can turn off the group by SKU. And if you are implementing the same version per SKU, then you're going to want to use this. And hit confirm. And then again, you will select files per SKU. Now, I want to pivot a little bit. We're going to close. We can save this plan. We can come back to it if we need to. But I want to pivot a little bit to focus on the test drive and what, if you're running the test drive, the example that we'd like you to execute, which is a bit more focused and it really looks at one specific device. So let's go ahead and build an OS plan. We're going to call it test-drive-switch transfer create. Okay, so I have my name. I don't need a description. This is going to be the transfer only phase. I can leave it as group by SKU, although it's not going to matter much in this case because it is only one device that we're going to be working with or focusing on. And I can let it go ahead and run the API check, so I don't need to skip it. As mentioned, we do recommend executing the snapshots, but we're going to not make that part of this demo. So the next part is add your device. Again, for the test drive, we facilitate the upgrade and downgrade of this 3650 switch. So select that switch. This is the only physical device in the pod. The rest are virtual appliances that run on VMs. So we hit save and back. So I have my switch, and if I press that there, I see my details and I see I'm running 16.6.5. So let's go ahead and edit the plan here. And again, you could have a catalog view. I don't have a catalog entry assigned for this SKU. So I'm going to go to my server view and I'm going to look at my Cat3K. I'm going to go from 16.6.5 to 16.6.7. So I'm going to select that image and move it over. If you're running the test drive and you have a switch that's already at 16.6.7, then you can execute a downgrade and go to 16.6.5. So in this case, it's an upgrade. I have my image. I'm going to use SCP and keep the default window size. I click save and back. So now my plan is set. The next step is to execute a validation. So I validate my plan. So here in the validation, you're going to see the log of kind of a high-level summary of what's happening. Behind the scenes, there is a lot of checks and health checks that are occurring. We're making sure we have connectivity to the file server. We're making sure the image is there and available. We're making sure the boot statement is correct, the config register is correct. There is space on that device, essentially doing a health check and ensuring the device is in a good state. This is where the options come into play, because if you wanted to save time, you could turn off more of the pre-checks and execute the job faster. But those pre-checks can help save you from a bad condition, because what you don't want to do is move an incompatible image or have a device in a bad health state and go to reboot it to a new image and have it fail and potentially kind of brick the device where it's not accessible. So let's take a look and let the validation complete. Okay, so I see the validation did just complete here and no validation errors were detected. We're in a good state. So I go back, and the next step here in progress is to run the plan. With running, you have basically three options. One is run now, which is you click it and run. That's what we're going to do. You can schedule the job. If you do schedule it, you will then see it in your schedules view. So that job would be scheduled and would kick off when that time hit. Another option that we're not going to cover in this tutorial, but you can build OS plans and you can run OS plans in Network RPA. So if you wanted process where you had more custom pre-checks and post-checks, or you wanted to run an audit with it, you can build that in Network RPA. So it's another option. So here we are ready to go. We can run the plan. We're going to click Run Now. So when the plan is running, you're going to see a line item for every device that is running on, and you can page through all your devices. And you're going to see an execution status, a phase, and a message, and a percentage of complete, a timestamp completed on, and then the detailed log. So when you're monitoring this, you're pretty much looking at the main message that's going to update you in each phase of the process. So now it's initializing the OSM data. It runs discovery. It runs a health check. It's analyzing the system. And what I do want to show you is you do have very granular views of what's happening. You can double click into the log on a device by device basis and see exactly what Gluware is doing. So we are interrogating it to ensure everything is set up on it. And then one of the last steps we do is we lock it. You just saw acquiring a lock, and we move a lock file on the device so that if anyone else is using Gluware, if they try to run an OSM job, we check for that lock file. And if the device is locked, you can't run it. So that's one protection we have, where you don't have kind of conflicting jobs that are trying to execute that. So you can see here, it's going through numerous other things, including cleanups. Most of the processes, and this is a Cisco example, but the image is a bundle. And so when that package is unbundled, you get a lot of packages that are installed on the device. And so when you're moving away from a package you're not running anymore, you really need to go and clean up those files. You don't want it consuming all the space on your flash. That could prevent you from being able to move an image for an upgrade or downgrade. So you can see here, it's going through all that cleanup, and we'll wait a few more minutes and jump in when the plan has progressed. Okay, so the job has completed, and I do see it resulted in a finished status here. And just to note, I mean, it did take almost 20 minutes. So I do want to just zoom back in this log a little bit, just to show you that while the transfer was occurring, normally you just see these, like the bangs in terms of progress, the exclamation points. But one interesting note is Gluware spawns a second SSH session into the device, and every 30 seconds is looking at the directory to show you the progress. So we're able to actually update the progress, and so you can see more of a real-time view of what's happening. And then as that transfer is finalized, there is the final validations in terms of checksum checks. We verify the image and then remove the lock so that the image is there, it's ready to go. This device is unlocked, and we have finished the job. So back to the details view, I see this particular plan has executed to a success. It's final, and the action is complete. Again, if you're doing this with multiple devices, you have a line item per each device. One thing I want to note is that a plan will run to completion, right? So the plan result may always be complete, that doesn't necessarily mean it was successful. A plan can complete with failures, or it can complete with successes. So you do want to actually understand the execution status when you're running. Now that we've run this plan, the next step would be to complete the upgrade by executing a deploy. So I want to show you one last kind of interesting, useful tip, is that you can select the plan that you ran. In this case, it was a successful transfer. I'm going to use the clone feature and clone the plan. So I don't have to reselect my devices. I don't have to reselect the images and things like that. And now I'm just going to rename it from test drive switch transfer to deploy. And I'll say upgrade. And again, now instead of being a transfer only, I'm going to be executing a deploy new image. And I can leave the rest here. And essentially all I need to do is validate the plan again. Again, it will just execute a validation that there are no errors and the health is good. So I see no validation errors. I click back. So my plan is drafted, my plan is validated, and now I can run the plan. One thing to mention again is that in this case, we've already done a transfer, but if we go to deploy and the image is not on the device, the deploy action will initiate that transfer and then complete the deploy. So let's go ahead and run this job and complete the upgrade. Run now, run. Again, you have the ability to just view it here at the plan execution level and watch status here. The other option you have for a very detailed view is you can go into a device log by double-clicking on your log. Okay, we can see the job finished. And if we navigate back to, so you can see all the details in the log here. If we navigate back to the details, we can see we finished successfully in a final and the action was completed. So this is an example of a two-step upgrade where we've done a transfer and then we executed the deploy and we completed the switch upgrade. So this completes the demonstration or the tutorial for OSM Part 2. Thank you for your time and attention.